I've always found the Golden to be one of the more interesting levels that you see on the Demon list. I can't remember when it got added to it. I think it was a year ago or so. Unlike most of the ones that you see on there, Tartarus, you know, Sakupin Circles, Abyss of Darkness, they're all pretty much the standard red, black, very hellish themed kind of levels. The Golden was a little bit different than that one. It came off of an actual mystic tale. You know, the tale of the Golden City. One of the crazy things about the level actually is the set of circumstances that actually led to it being created, which are a little bit more complicated than just somebody decided to make a level. I want to just thank you for watching the video or clicking on it in the first place. And if you have an idea for something that I can make a video on down the road, let me know. If you put it in the comments and I see it, I'll absolutely give you a shout out if I make a video on it. So history. Let's talk about the level a little bit more before we talk about the old history. So the Golden, which was #1 on the list for quite a while, I think. There was always a little bit of a contention between the Golden and Tartarus, from what I remember. I think they flip-flop back and forth a little bit, but it was always interesting to kind of see the debate going on between who thought which one was harder. And the level is only 1 minute and 24 seconds long, and yet it was considered to be one of the hardest levels in the game, which is kind of neat, you know, going off of a full-on green style that it had, being one of the hardest levels and standing out from all those red levels that I was talking about before is kind of neat. Of course, it uses Thunderzone V2, which is a fantastic song, but I want to talk more about the set of circumstances, like I said, that caused the level to even exist. In order to actually talk about what I want to talk about, we have to go back a little bit more than you probably think. When I was a young kid, and I mean pretty young kid, I was introduced to a bunch of different movies, video games, and I loved all of them. Growing up, I definitely was a bit more of the shy kind, and I was always found playing video games, and my first console was the GameCube. You know, we had Super Mario Sunshine, we had a bunch of other super fun games like that. And I grew up on this and grew up watching a lot of movies and animated films. And one of the big corporations, I guess, that is known obviously for their movies is actually Disney. Now, Disney has made a bunch of different films, animated, 2D, 3D. They've kind of moved towards the 3D thing recently, which they definitely strayed away from that whole 2D hand-drawn art style, which I loved. One of the reasons why I love it actually is one of my favorite of these movies that they made is actually called The Road to El Dorado. Now, this is a fantastic movie, and if you have not seen it, you absolutely should. It is one of their older movies that I don't think gets as much recognition as the majority of theirs. And if you look on the the reviews, they're pretty bad, but it is such a fantastic movie. This movie, I watched it when I was really young, and I've seen it a bunch of times, and it always was one of those ones that stuck in the back of my head. Now, fast forward a little bit to high school. I started playing Geometry Dash in high school, actually. I don't remember the exact year that I started playing it, but it was way back when there was only like Hexagon Force as the final level, so it was a long time ago. At this time, of course, I wasn't really into building. Now, moving along a little bit, I've touched Geometry Dash, and I remember this movie from all those years ago. I took a break, you know, I didn't touch the game at all for quite some time. And then it comes to a different part of my life, actually, where I was introduced to streaming, and I started streaming a video game called Realm of the Mad God on my brother's computer in his room. Unfortunately, there came a time where Realm of the Mad God started not doing as well. I wasn't enjoying it, I didn't really have fun with the game anymore, and I wanted to find a new game that was enjoyable for me to play and stream, because I started to find that playing video games without streaming wasn't as fun as it used to be for me. And I think a lot of people are kind of going through that nowadays. You always hear people say, oh, video games, they're not fun anymore. Well, this was me going through that little period, you know? I wasn't enjoying the games that I used to. Call of Duty, LittleBigPlanet, all those games, I just wasn't having as much fun. So I looked back at the game that I played in high school, Geometry Dash, and I realized that it had an editor. Now, I also mentioned LittleBigPlanet, which was a super fun game, and I loved building levels in that game. So I thought to myself, if this game has an editor and I can stream it and there's a decent viewer base on YouTube, I might as well play this game, get good at it, and start building levels. That could be really fun. It was pretty lucky that I actually found a game that was able to have the sort of building control and freedom that I wanted to, while also being able to stream it and have fun with a new community, which was really enjoyable for me at the time. And it was a very slim chance that I actually decided to start playing this game. So I started building, and I think a little bit of it is decently well-known history. I started off with Serpent's Shrine. I met Rob Buck. Rob Buck came to my stream one time and got the level featured, and then I did Trickster's Funhouse. Now, after this, I started to get a little bit more popular in my buildings, and this was 1.9 still, so we didn't have any of the moving objects and stuff, and I had 2 levels out, so I was kind of looking for a new idea, something that I could make another level out of. And in the back of my mind, there was always, like I said, that movie El Dorado. I knew right then and there, after a little bit of thinking, like, I have to make a level about this. I absolutely love the movie. I love the tale, the folklore, the myth of this golden city hidden in a dense jungle. And I thought it was absolutely fascinating and something that could tell an extremely unique story, even if it's in some simple 2D platformer game like GD. I started working on the level, and I actually built half of it on mobile. So a lot of it was built on mobile, a lot of it was built on computer. It kind of mixed and matched what I was actually building this level on. The level also didn't really gain much traction at the time because not many people knew who I was, even though I had 2 featured levels already out there. I wasn't a very well-known builder, so while I did have a few people watching my streams and hanging out, enjoying me designing this level, it wasn't as significant as you would have thought based on how many downloads the level has today. So 2.0 came and passed, and I began verifying this level that I spent a few months working on. I had done a bunch of building on both mobile and computer, and I began the verification process of what I thought at the time was going to be one of the hardest levels I could ever do. And it was a pretty difficult level at the time. I verified it on stream actually, and funnily enough, back in the day, I never recorded any of my stuff and put it on YouTube. So there was no video of me beating this on YouTube. And I still remember Riot immediately thought that it was one of the hardest games in the level and accused me of hacking. And still to this day, that is one of the highlights of my career. Being called a hacker by somebody who was so unbelievably good at this game that it just blew my mind. Because for some reason, when the level came out, people thought it was the hardest level in the game. Somehow. It makes no sense to me. But I think it was because the quick timings, people didn't know how to do them. So they really did not think that it was possible. They thought maybe it was hacked or speed hacked, I guess. But it wasn't. And in fact, I verified the level 3 times in a row, which is pretty nuts. Now, the next thing that happened that was pretty significant is I started on a sequel. So I uploaded this level, I got accused of hacking, and I started on the sequel to El Dorado, which was going to be a level called Atlantis. And I still have I think I still have the actual level itself on my account. Maybe I could finish that up someday. Another level very similar to that. But I started this level, and soon as you hear from so many other builders, I just lost motivation. I couldn't do it. So I gave up on this level. If I had finished it, there would have been a sequel to El Dorado. There would have been a sequel to El Dorado that is not related to the whole jungle theme stuff. And you have to fast forward a little bit, and a player comes in called Bo, or Bo, I think it is. Bo plays my level, El Dorado. Now, thank goodness I didn't finish Atlantis at the time, because if I had finished Atlantis, there would have already been a sequel to El Dorado, an official sequel. Now, it turns out that Bo actually liked El Dorado enough that they made their own level called El Dorado 2, which you can find, I believe, on the account still. Now, El Dorado 2 was basically a copy-paste of the design of El Dorado, except a little bit less themed. It was more focused on the jungle than it was the actual Golden City, which in my opinion is a little bit of a letdown, because the Golden City was the whole point of the level. You know, you going through this dark and twisted jungle to emerge in this beautiful Golden City that's been abandoned for years and nobody's come across it. So not having this in the level kind of, in my opinion, ruined it a little bit. But just like me, Bo was not satisfied with the quality of the level El Dorado 2. So they began working on another project. And if you look on their YouTube channel, this project, originally it was unnamed. And it had the same song, Thunderzone V2, which El Dorado, my original level about El Dorado, has. And it has a very similar color scheme. It was a lot of very tight angles and tight jumps. It was green. It looked like it was going to be in a jungle. And then the official name for the level came out, The Golden. If you're not aware, The Golden is the English translation of El Dorado. So there's a pretty apparent direct connection between those two. And you can tell that Bo was not satisfied with El Dorado 2, so they wanted to try again. And try again they did, and they succeeded. So The Golden ended up becoming a massive project. Rather than just being a solo project, project, which was Bo's original plan, it turned out to be a mega collab, and it turned out to be a hard mega collab. So just like the original El Dorado, it had those super tight gameplay types, and it was looking like it was going to be one of the hardest levels in the game, just like the original. A fun fact here before I continue is that if you actually look on Bo's YouTube channel and you look at their preview for an upcoming solo project, you can see a comment thread that goes on between myself and Bo, which is rather interesting, and it's confirming that the Golden is going to be a sequel, an official sequel to El Dorado. And I always thought this was super cool because I really do love the level. I do think that there are some things missing with the level, which I'll talk in a little bit about, but all in all, it's a very cool level. So the Golden got built by a bunch of different crazy, well-known creators, as well as some lesser-known creators, and it came out as a storm. This level took the #1 spot, and there were huge fights about what was going to be #1. Tartarus, the Golden, which one was harder, and there was constant fighting between the two groups that each believed that they made the harder level, or they had the harder level. Despite how hostile the environment got, I actually think that this was really good for the community at the time because there wasn't too much going on in terms of new levels coming out. So having this big sort of war between the two sides, both who enjoyed their own level a little bit more and think their own level is the harder one, was really interesting to watch, especially as a creator from the sidelines like myself. I think anybody who remembers those days, I think it was a really good time in the community. You know, you still had a bunch of massive players playing the game and beating levels and having fun, and overall it was just like a good time, you know? So after a bunch of arguing between the different sides, it turned out that the Golden got placed at #1, and this was a final decision. I think down the road actually it did get placed at #2 again. I think it ended up below Tartarus. If you look at the demon list today, actually you'll see that the Golden is now below Tartarus big time. So the Golden sits at 14 and Tartarus sits at 9, I think, which is rather interesting. It's kind of neat how a new level, the hype behind it, has pushed it to a harder spot on the demon list. I wonder if that happens nowadays. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So at the end of the day, you know, the Golden was a pretty sick level, if I have to say so. It's really cool. Now, I do have some complaints with it that I want to talk about. One of the things lacking from it was the whole Golden City, and I know that the end screen has a Golden City-like piece of artwork, but I think if it had, you know, a dynamic where you start off in this dark dungeon, and then as you're going through the level, it becomes more colorful and more vibrant, and you start to see those reds and golds that you expect to see in the city, that would have been a lot cooler. And I think that would have made it a lot better in terms of a themed level, because as it stands, it's not really a themed level. But of course, it's up to the builder to make it whatever they want. Now, despite the fact that there are a few things that I would personally change about the level, I still think that it turned out really well. Even more than that, I find it just amazing how crazy it is that the level actually exists. By the way, I hid this cube that I put on the screen right now. I put it somewhere in the video. If you find that cube and put the time stamp of it in the comments, I will pin your comment and respond to it. So first person to do that gets their comment pinned, which is kind of sick. Peace.